In 1893, a 6-year-old boy in a small Italian village told his mother something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. He said the beautiful lady who visited him at night was not a dream. He insisted she was real. Her name, he said, was Mary. The boy's name was Francesco Fordione, the child who would eventually be known as Padre Pio. These early subjective visions would soon collide with a physical reality that investigators would spend the next 70 years trying to reconcile. This is the entrance to the Vatican's secret archives. Inside these vaults, the life of that child is preserved in the form of sworn medical depositions, police records, and the testimony of thousands of witnesses. Francesco was born in Pietrocina, a hilltop village in southern Italy. His family lived in a world of harsh economic reality, a house of stone, a diet of small harvests, and the relentless manual labor required to survive in the rural in the year 1880s. From the time he could speak, Francesco's behavior deviated from that of his peers. He spoke of his guardian angel as a literal companion, a luminous figure who was simply there for years. He assumed every child had the same experience, only to eventually realize he was alone in it. His mother's own documented accounts describe finding her son prostrate on the stone floor of the family chapel, weeping. When she asked why, he pointed to an empty space and told her he was here. He was right here. While most parents would have dismissed such things as imagination, Maria Giuseppa paid attention. She had watched her son pray for hours before he was old enough to read. The burden of the supernatural didn't first fall on the church or the medical community. It fell on ordinary parents, forced to witness the impossible. At 15, Francesco wanted to enter the Capuchin order, but his family faced a structural barrier. His father, Grazio, was an illiterate farmer with no money for the entry fees or the education the friary required. This archival photo shows the reality Grazio chose to face to fund his son's spiritual path. He sailed to America to find manual labor, joining the thousands of immigrants who traded their physical strength for a future. Back home, Grazio sent his wages home every month. For years he worked until he had earned enough to put his son through the school and the novitiate. Every miracle and documented event that defines this story traces back to this physical act of parental sacrifice. Without a father's labor in the American dirt, the name Padre Pio would likely have remained unknown to history. Francesco entered the friary in 1903 as Brother P.O. and was ordained a priest on August 10th, 1910. He was 23 years old. Shortly after his ordination, he wrote a letter to his spiritual director that provides a unique look into his psychological state. In plain, deliberate language, he described experiencing invisible wounds on his hands. He wrote of bleeding without a visible cause and of an intense physical pain that he could not explain to himself. He begged his director not to think him insane. His own words describe a man in a state of deep psychological terror, confessing, "I am frightened of myself." This private correspondence is foundational to the case. It established a documented baseline of sanity for the Vatican investigators who would later analyze every aspect of his psychological health. For 8 years, the wounds remained invisible. Then came the morning of September 20th, 1918. Padre Pio was praying alone in a church choir loft in San Giovanni Rotondo. He would later describe a vision of a luminous figure who pierced his hands, his feet, and his side with beams of light. This image shows the physical artifacts that remained. The once invisible pain became permanent visible wounds that bled constantly for the next 50 years. These injuries never healed. The skin showed no signs of infection or the normal biological closure of a wound, a fact that forced modern medical science to enter the monastery to investigate. What is the objective conclusion for a life that begins with unprovable visions and results in half a century of medically inexplicable physical anomalies? It is the conclusion that investigators and skeptics were eventually forced to reach, that some aspects of this man's life resist ordinary explanation. In the episodes ahead, we will follow the 5 medical doctors who examined those wounds under controlled conditions and could find no physiological cause. We will look at the case of a young girl from Sicily who gained the ability to see despite being born without pupils, an anatomical anomaly that left examining physicians with no biological explanation for her sight. And we will see the future pope who carried a prophecy from Padre Pio for decades before it was fulfilled. Every name, date, and event in this series is drawn from the documented historical record. The investigation continues in the next episode.